received numerous awards, including Principal of the Year, Louisiana PTA Educator of Distinction, and several outstanding conference research paper awards. He has received over $3 million in grant awards and has a proven record of publication with 35 refereed articles, a book chapter, and a series of administrator training manuals. He has also conducted over 90 professional research presentations and 50 speaking engagements. Dr. Jennifer Styron is an assistant professor at the University of South Alabama, College of Nursing, and a former research specialist and distance education coordinator at the University of Southern Mississippi. She has been teaching especially in courses Advanced Nursing Research. I'd like to welcome.
Good morning. I'm going to talk to you this morning about a strategy that has a theoretical base, but I'm going to mine it down to practice and hopefully provide you with something that you can bring back to your places and use next week when you begin your classes again. I'm going to talk about a way to promote interdisciplinary communication and collaboration. You know, at least the way my mind thinks, quite often we know what we need to do. We might even have some solutions. The big issue is how do we get it done? So this is mining down to that how to make it happen. When I became coordinator of the program at South Alabama, that was my first challenge. The instructional strategies, most of the program had already been determined before I was brought on board, so I was tasked with the charge to actually make the project work. So today I'm going to talk about a way of establishing a conversational framework, some common language, a collaborative method, and then some data that we collected regarding this project. But essentially, I have taken faculty members who are participating in this project, there are about 60 of them, and they have been broken into teams. 20 participated in the strategy that I'm going to talk about this morning. These are some pictures of professors working together in teams. These are professors from various disciplines. And what I have tried to do is establish a conversation frame, and it's based on pedagogy. Of course, content is going to be different based on the disciplines that are involved, but the commonality is the pedagogy. And within that, there's a specific pedagogical approach that's been selected by professors, and this was selected before I was brought on board. It's based around a strategy called TeamBased Learning. Now, the way I keep the conversations in motion is through a process called learning walks. And that's the main message of this presentation this morning, is to talk to you about learning walks. And of course, the learning walks are able to structure a way of talking that professors can now bring in their particular content from their individual disciplines. You guys who have talked to me the last couple of years, you've heard me talk about team-based learning. It's an instructional strategy aimed at improving critical thinking and collaboration. It's highly structured in that the first part of it is based around acquisition of content. So students will begin with readings, flip PowerPoints, web resources, and then when the professor feels that they have mastered content, they go into a Readiness Assurance process. There's appeals, there's a clarifying lecture, then there's application. And I thought it could be best described by this video clip that's found on the TeamBased Learning Collaborative website. I'm going to play that for you now.
Even in large classes with fixed seating, team-based learning motivates students to high levels of attendance, preparation, participation, and critical thinking.
Okay, let's try that again, see if I can get that with video.
Even in large classes with fixed seating, team-based learning motivates students to high levels of attendance, preparation, participation, and critical thinking. But team-based learning is not any old form of active learning or group work. In team-based learning, students engage course content at an applied level, motivated by both task design and incentive structures to spend time on task, gathering input from all their teammates. 4 practical elements of team-based learning prepare and motivate students for this high level of engagement. The first is strategically formed permanent teams. Decide what student characteristics would make it easier or more difficult for a student to do well in your class, and ensure that these characteristics are spread as fairly as possible across teams.
So how can we create a team that's going to be balanced in terms of, the characteristics of the students in the class? By having all the students at the beginning of the semester, take a survey and basically answer a set of questions that would then help us to kind of group them. And so we built up a spreadsheet of teams that we could then assign the students to. So when we come to class, up on the big DocuCam, I have kind of a seating arrangement set up of the entire classroom and where your team is supposed to be sitting.
The way that I constructed them was to make them as diverse as possible. These teams are 6, 7 members each, and these teams are permanent. So they don't shift. This is who you belong to, and you sink or swim, and I'm hoping swim together.
Our group was really diverse. We had 3 seniors, 2 freshmen, everyone's a different major. No one knew each other going into it. When you come together, it was pretty interesting to see us all become like friends at the end of it.
The second element of team-based learning is a sequence of activities that takes place at the beginning of each unit of the course. This sequence is called the Readiness Assurance process because it assures that students are ready to move forward into high-level application of the material. Having completed assigned readings, students first take an individual test over them. Then they take the exact same test again as a team, coming to consensus on their team answers. They get immediate feedback on their team tests, after which they can write appeals if they figure they can make a case for their answers which were marked as incorrect.
To guide them, I've created a reading guide with some general questions and then some specific terms that I want them to look for. Having read the books and looked over the guide and reasonably comfortable, at least that they've read the information, they come into class the first day and they take a quiz. 20 points, multiple choice. Then, after they've done that, I put them in the groups. Each team retakes the same quiz, and they have a scratch-off.
I distribute these scratch cards, and the students, then I break the students into their groups, and they go through the questions as a group, and they decide what the answer should be, and then they scratch off what they think the answer should be. And if the answer is correct, then they see a little asterisk.
I'm not scratching until I get approval from everyone.
Okay, before we said come on in. That's wrong. So now we're going with D.
Because he signed the with the scratch-off thing, I actually liked the way that worked because you had to keep going until you got it right. And so you couldn't just miss it and say, oh, forget it, we didn't get it. You kind of had to, okay, well, if this isn't the case, now what?
When I walk around, it is just astounding to hear these students arguing over fine points of Texas civil procedure. They point out to each other, well, this is what this rule says. Well, this comment in this rule says something else, and how do you put those together?
And I've never heard anyone say, I told you it was B, and you overrode what I said, or it's kind of remarkable in that way. I found it seems very collaborative and not competitive.
There's one guy who was really, really smart in our group, and there's one question where we all had the same answer, and he had one different one, and I think we went through almost every answer except his, and at the end he was right. And it's just because he didn't speak up. Next time it got around, he made sure he's like, listen, I remember this. This happened because of this. I'm pretty sure this is right. We're I think we owe you one. So we trusted him. And it was right, and that was the best part about it. So just kind of involving everyone.
At the end of the Readiness Assurance process, If teams feel they can argue in support of any of their answers which were marked incorrect, they can generate written appeals, which must consist of a clear statement of argument, supported by specific evidence from the readings.
If I wrote a question that's poorly worded, if it's ambiguous, they can rewrite it. If I just put the wrong answer, they can go into their book, write out this is the correct answer on this page, and they have to cite the evidence.
They seem to work well together, and again, it's a real team spirit building exercise.
The Readiness Assurance process is followed by a clarifying lecture in which the teacher can focus specifically upon what the team scores indicate the students have not yet grasped. The third element of team-based learning consists of application activities in which students must make decisions to solve discipline-based problems, often using case studies, realistic data, or other specific examples of materials from your field. These activities work best when they incorporate 4 elements that all begin with the letter S. First, problems must be significant in the sense of demonstrating a concept's usefulness. Second, groups should be required to use course concepts to make a specific choice. For example, which procedure is best to implement in a given situation and why? Or from a certain article, what is the best piece of evidence in support of an argument and why? Third, all teams should work on the same problem, case, or question, so they will care about decisions other groups made and their rationales. Fourth, if possible, groups should report choices simultaneously, so differences in group conclusions can be explored immediately.
This semester I taught one class with 345 students in it. Oftentimes with cases, there's not necessarily a right answer or wrong answer. It's, how is it that you reached the particular decision that you reached? What were the steps that you went through in order to reach the conclusion that you reached? So I use the iClicker technology to be able to kind of gauge where the students are at any given time in terms of what they're thinking about the case.
There's emphasis on you have to learn a certain number of facts, but more I'm interested in them learning the process of thinking through history, how to think like a historian does. The way I've done this is to create a kind of a large sheet, an 11 by 17 sheet, that has kind of steps that one needs to go through to think about this answer. Each of these documents basically is steps to writing a good essay. So I had agree or disagree, Cold War fears were justified, and taking this from the historian's viewpoint. And so agree, disagree, write a very short explanation. So the idea is to take them down sort of sequentially through a series of thought.
It's about the New Deal. And it was, if you had to summarize it in one sentence, and we had one sentence here, pick which one you thought was more accurate. And then you take that one and compare it to another sentence, which one's more accurate. And then you take the winner of that one, like a tournament kind of. And so you end up with the one sentence you like the best at the end. And we found that one was kind of hard just because, you want to take part of this sentence and part of this sentence and part of this sentence and kind of put it all together in your own thing, which we had to do at the end.
We could say this about them that's negative, we could say this about them that's positive, and then to write some sort of summary statement that tries to get at some more nuanced meaning.
And then we could go up, and each one of us, we wouldn't go up and present, but we could give our big sheets. She could put it on a projector, and each one of us could, have a different, take on it.
This is a great exercise because they are using the rules to dissect a statement and make an argument one way or the other.
What my reasoning is that
Okay, so that's the common language that cuts across all disciplines. And you saw in that video just now, there were a number of disciplines represented. At the university that I'm working at, we're focusing on STEM disciplines and also health sciences. Now let's talk about learning walks. So we have a common language based on the concept of team-based learning. So how do we keep this going? And that's where the learning walk process comes in. It was a strategy developed by Galat and Parker. It essentially is connected to a medical model. If you can think of a team, doctor, nurse, therapist, whatever, evaluating patients, listening to what they have to say, and then making prescriptions, was the genesis of the learning walks. Learning walks, the purpose is to build collegiality, to open classroom doors, to learn together, provide a structure for reflection. During the process, dialogue about improving in teaching and learning is the focus. You look back at what happened, what was learned, and then you look forward to anticipate what's coming. When you actually conduct a learning walk, and this is a picture of a learning walk in progress, and you see there are 3 professors, 4, maybe 5, it's a large group. Their focus is on professor to student interaction, and they're looking for evidence of active learning, student engagement. So as it applies to team-based learning, the learning walk would take place during application activities. You usually have 3 to 4 instructors conduct a learning walk. One of these instructors serves as a mentor or a leader. They coordinate the process. How often does it happen? 1 to 3 times a semester, and that's the actual learning walk itself, where the instructors visit each other's classrooms, but there are other times when they will meet to have discussions on their own. So what happens during a learning walk? All right, team members, they support each other, they observe what's going on, they predict, they analyze, but they do not judge. One thing that I want to emphasize too is that this is a coaching process. It's a non-evaluative. So the people involved in this have nothing to do formally with tenure and promotion or evaluation. When I train people to go through this process, I even coach them to be sure that when they walk into classrooms, they do not bring pencil, paper, pads, anything that would give a professor the illusion that they're taking notes that could later come back to haunt them. So strictly a coaching process. One of the beauties of my position is I'm non-evaluative. So they can trust me, they can talk to me about problems that they're having as they talk to their colleagues as they go through this process. Professors have to have some assumptions. They have to believe that all students can learn. They have to believe that they too are learning. They have to understand that there is no such thing as there. It's almost based on that continuous improvement model. Another predication of this process is that they have to believe in sharing. Sometimes professors, we want to hold ideas close to the vest. Well, if this is going to work, you have to have people that trust each other and will share their ideas. Reflective questioning is another part of the process, and this is one of my roles in training professors to be involved, is to learn how to ask the right questions to each other as they coach each other. Quite often we want to go straight to this is what's wrong, this is what you need to do to correct it. So it's a challenge to think from that perspective, but I tell them it's just the same thing they do when they're teaching a class now. A good professor is asking the right questions that's stimulating thoughts among their students. Same thing when professors coach each other. Now the actual process, you can think of it in 4 steps. Preparation, the actual visit, the debriefing, which happens immediately after the visit, and then a closing conversation. During the preparation, the leader of the team, the mentor, will assemble the team, discuss a scorecard, which I'm going to show you in a second, discuss the learning outcome for that particular course, that particular class, and the type of evidence that they're looking for to determine whether or not the outcome was met. The second part will be the actual visit, 10 to 20 minutes. Notice it's not an entire period. It's during an application activity. And during this time, the team members will enter the classroom in a non-disruptive fashion, looking solely for student engagement. They may speak to students quietly if they think it's appropriate. And they may ask students in their ear, what are you learning? Why are you being asked to do this? How is this going to help you with your career? How important is this? Just to get a sense for feedback when they talk to the instructors during a debriefing process. Immediately after, there's a conversation based around these concepts. I mentioned a team-based learning scorecard And you can see a sort of a Likert-ish scale. For instance, you see the top line, covering content or using content. So these are conversation points. When the learning walk took place, was the professor just covering content or were they using content? What about the teams? Were these teams selected by students, or were there some plan for creation of the team that the professor came up with? So these are more detailed talking points regarding the process. Immediately after the walk, the team will go someplace quiet and debrief. Again, 5 to 10 minutes. They'll talk about what they saw. Again, in a non-judgmental kind of way. So I saw terrible things in that class. No, that's not where we're going with this. What did we see? One of the most important aspects of the debriefing is for professors to ask themselves and each other, did I see something that I could use in my class? It's one of the most powerful parts of this. After the debriefing, the mentor will make an appointment with that professor and have a closing conversation. The most important part of this conversation, again, is to ask reflective questions, to get that professor to think through that lesson. Did you achieve your outcomes? Were your students engaged? How did you know that? And coach them through that process. And that essentially is the learning walks. Now, to get a sense for whether or not this is working, I mentioned earlier I have 60 professors at this point involved in the project from various disciplines. 20 volunteered to take part in learning walks this last year. What I did is I pulled out student data from their courses and I compared it to the student data generated in the classes of the professors who were not participating. And Jennifer is going to go through those data slides now.
The first thing we looked at was a faculty questionnaire, and we wanted to see what their perceptions were of mentoring. And as you can see, we asked them if they felt like it fostered interdisciplinary relationships, communication, and collaboration. And on a Likert scale of 1 to 5, we've got a 3.95 to 4.1. So overall, faculty seem to be generally satisfied with the mentoring process. We had each faculty develop student learning outcomes. Those were based on the outcomes that they selected. Obviously, they're the experts in their field. Those were measured by specific assessments, and whether or not students met their student learning outcomes set for them was based on whether or not they achieved 80% competency in that area or not. So these were identified by the faculty as to whether or not their student learning outcomes were met or not met. And as you can see, the quality enhancement plan faculty who were mentored, all of their scores or their mastery levels were increased with the exception of the creating domain. Next, we asked them about their critical thinking skills, and we looked at this information again by whether or not the faculty member was mentored, and we found no difference in critical thinking scores based on which group you were in, mentoring or non-mentoring. But we did find a difference in pre- and post-test critical thinking, and then we also found an interaction between test scores and group. So if you'll see, the pre- and post-test for each group did the mean scores did increase, and you can see in group 1, which is our mentored group, we had a much higher increase in our mean scores. Second was our collaboration skills. Again, no significant differences, but we did find one between pre- and post-test mean scores, as well as an interaction between the group and test scores. And you'll see again, our mentored group are the 1s, and I believe we were supposed to have a 2 underneath that too. So first 2 are your mentored group, and your second 2 are your non-mentored group, and you'll see that our scores increase. Then we looked at critical thinking domains by faculty group, and this was based on the California Critical Thinking Skills Test. They have identified 7 different constructs or domains and then they give an overall score of reasoning. And we did find a difference in domains based on group type, and they were specifically in the areas of deduction, analysis, and inference. And you'll see that all the mean scores in the mentoring group increased versus the groups that weren't mentored. Then our reports provided to us from Insight Assessment compared groups to an aggregate sample of four-year college students across the United States. And the mentored coached group student scores ranked in the 37th percentile, while non-mentored coached group scores were in the 20th percentile. So we found that to be an interesting statistic. We also looked at student persistence and grades by faculty group, and we did a Pearson chi-square test on this. We found no significant difference in withdrawal rates. However, there was a slight decrease. So we're thinking as we continue to do this, we might find a difference at some point, but right now we haven't found one. As well as student grades, there was no difference by group, but both teams, so mentored and non-mentoring, have been coached and provided professional development and training on team-based learning. So they are using an instructional strategy that is supposed to increase these things. So it could be the reason that we're not finding significant differences in these groups, but again, longitudinal data will tell us that. Some of our limitations were that we had an unequal sample size. Obviously, we had fewer mentored groups than we had non-mentored groups. We tried to pull courses in the non-mentored Quality Enhancement Plan faculty members who were teaching in similar courses to those who were mentored. We had the inability to connect our pre- and post-test measures, so we had to treat those individually when we were running statistical tests. So we have no way of doing that. We hope to improve this. Faculty involved in both samples are considered our early adopters. So Rogers Diffusion of Innovation would say these people are willing to change, embrace change, and they're going to be your go-getters. So that is a limitation. And the fidelity of implementation. And so our conclusions were based on a majority of analysis that revealed that we did have higher assessments in our courses with faculty who participated in the mentoring. Our learning walks were an effective strategy for peer-to-peer collaboration and communication. We did hear that among all the faculty who were a part of this process. They provided individualized classroom coaching that we don't often get in higher ed, and fostered a team approach to the implementation of team-based learning. Faculty also indicated mentoring improved their relationships, their collaboration, and communication, particularly with even in some of the specific departments, they may or may not have been talking to a lot of those people who actually came into their classroom. So it helped develop the relationships so that even outside of these learning walks, they were able to talk more collaboratively across disciplines. And then team-based learning provided a common instructional strategy that's applicable in all disciplines, and it can be utilized to enhance interprofessional education experiences. So all of our keynotes, we talked about improvisation yesterday in one of our sessions. They're all geared about finding a common language and getting people from different disciplines to come together. So we're finding that this team-based learning strategy is a way that we can bring people together across disciplines and talk about similar things. So our recommendations would be to ensure that mentors are well-trained and committed to the goal, that you provide the training and support needed for mentors, specifically release time, potentially a stipend. They will commit some time to training, learning themselves, as well as setting up the classroom visits, so we need to make sure that they've got support in place for them. And your administration should be vested stakeholders, encourage participation, especially for new faculty. And then for future research, we'd like to do some comparison studies with faculty who aren't involved in the team-based learning quality enhancement plan, and so that we can better assess whether or not TBL and mentoring and coaching are having an impact on things. Does anybody have any questions?